What's up, everybody? Adam here. How y'all doing? Today we are going all in and absolutely smashing Windows Fundamentals Part 1. With that said, let's check out Task 1. This one is mostly just reading the overview. The key idea is that different Windows versions and editions have different features. So, read all through that. Nothing much really to be said there. So let's check the question. What encryption can you enable on Pro that you can't enable on Home? As I see it is not in the actual material there, probably you should just Google it, but I just happen to know that the answer is BitLocker. Drop in BitLocker, and that's Task 1 done. Let's move to Task number 2. All right, now we're on to Task 2, and this one is the Desktop GUI. So this is basically just Windows showing you the main stuff you're going to keep seeing over and over again. For the sake of the video, I'll go through all of this in case you're just getting familiar with Windows. But if you already more or less know the Windows GUI, feel free to skip ahead to the end where I answer the Task 2 questions. You've got the desktop itself, the Start menu, the search bar, the taskbar, and then some extra little things off to the side, like the notification area and task view. So even if the exact layout changes a bit depending on the version of Windows, the general idea is still, pretty much the same. The desktop is just your main workspace. That's where you can throw shortcuts, folders, files, whatever you want quick access to. And if you right-click on the desktop, you get a bunch of options for changing the view, making a new folder, going into display settings, personalizing the wallpaper, all that kind of stuff. Then you've got the Start menu, which is basically your launcher for everything. Applications, settings, power options, account stuff, all of that lives in there somewhere. Windows keeps redesigning it every few years because apparently they can't help themselves, but the purpose stays the same. The search box is exactly what it sounds like. You type something in, and Windows tries to find apps, files, settings, maybe web results if it feels like being annoying that day. Most of the time, if I'm trying to get somewhere quickly, I'll use search instead of digging through menus. Then down here on the taskbar, this is where you've got your pinned apps, your open apps, and a bunch of quick access stuff. So that was our little summary of what's important for us right now. Feel free to read through the stuff that's covered here. Now, before we go for the questions, let's start the VM. I am not really sure why is it on the third task. And time skip is done. Now for the first question, it asks which selection will hide or disable the search box. So if we right-click the taskbar, go to the search options, the one we want is hidden. That's the one that removes the search box from showing on the taskbar. To get it back, simply choose the Show Search Box option. Good boy. Then the next question asks which selection will hide or disable Task View. Same idea. Right-click the taskbar again, and the option is Show Task View button. If you uncheck that, it disappears. So the answer they want there is Show Task View button. And then the last question asks, besides clock and network, what other icon is visible in the notification area? Okay, I'll admit it. I had to look this up because I didn't know the name, and I'm still not 100% sure this is it, but the answer is Action Center. Walkie walk to Task 3. Now we're on Task 3, and this one is basically just the intro task. So there isn't really a question here. It just wants you to read the setup and start the virtual machine. You can see they give you the machine IP, the username, which is administrator, and the password, which is letmein123!. If you want to connect over remote desktop, you can do that. If you're just using the built-in VM on the page, that's fine too. Personally, if I've got an easy browser view or an attack box already sitting there, I'll usually just use that because it's less messing around. But if you want the full RDP session, go for it. Either way works. For task 4 is where the room starts getting a little more useful. This one is the file system, and the main thing they want you to understand here is NTFS. So NTFS stands for New Technology File System. Basically, this task is showing you that Windows uses file systems too. Same idea as Linux does, except here we're looking at the Windows side of it. A file system is just the way the operating system organizes and manages files on a drive. So basically, it's the system that tells Windows how to store stuff, find stuff, and control access to stuff. And on modern Windows machines, the one you're usually going to run into is NTFS. Yeah, like if someone has a newer laptop, desktop, or basically any normal Windows machine, it's usually going to be NTFS. Older USB drives, SD cards, or random older storage can still use older file systems. Now, the reason NTFS matters is because it supports a bunch of stuff that actually matters for how Windows works. Permissions are the big one. So, who can read a file, who can write to it, who can execute it, who owns it, all that kind of stuff. Read just means open or view it. Write means change it. Execute means run it if it's something like a program or a script. Ownership just means which user or account is considered the main controller of that file. And once you get into security work, that matters a lot more than just, yeah, this is the drive and here are some folders. It also supports things like compression, encryption, quotas, and auditing. Super simple version. Compression means making files take up less space. Encryption means locking the data so not just anyone can read it. Quotas means limiting how much storage someone can use. And auditing means tracking who did what. You don't need to go crazy with every single feature here, but the general idea is that NTFS gives Windows a lot more control over files and folders than the older file systems did. If you want to look at it on the machine, you can just go to This PC, right-click the C drive, hit Properties, and it'll show you the file system there. So that's a nice quick way to verify it yourself instead of just trusting the room text. Then they also start talking a bit about permissions, which I already touched a little bit just now. If you right-click a folder, go into Properties, then Security, that's where you can see which users and groups have access to that folder and what kind of access they have. Read, write, modify, full control, that kind of thing. Groups just means multiple users bundled together, like admins or standard users. Modify is basically edit plus delete in a lot of cases, and full control is pretty much complete control over that file or folder. You don't need to memorize every permission combination right now. Just understand that NTFS is what makes that possible. They also touch on alternate data streams, which is one of those things that sounds way scarier than it needs to at this exact moment. Think of it like extra data being attached to a file without it being super obvious when you first look at it. It is interesting from a security perspective because data can be attached to a file in a way that isn't immediately obvious, and that can get abused. But for this task, I wouldn't get stuck there. Just know it exists and move on. Yeah, we have this acronym question there. It is pretty easy. Fill it. That clears the task. And really, the bigger takeaway is just that NTFS is not just the name of the file system. It's also the reason Windows can do a lot of its permission and file security stuff in the first place. Now we're on task 5, and this one is about the Windows /System32 folder. This is one of those paths you'll hear all the time if you spend any amount of time around Windows, so it's worth at least knowing what it is instead of just recognizing the name. Let's go ahead and open it. So basically, the Windows folder is where the operating system keeps a lot of its core stuff. The operating system just means the main software running the computer, so in this case, Windows itself. And inside that, System32 is one of the main directories that holds a bunch of important system files. Directory just means folder. You'll find DLLs in there, system utilities, core Windows executables, all kinds of stuff that the OS needs in order to function properly. DLLs are basically helper files that programs and Windows itself can use. Utilities are built-in tools. Executables are files that actually run programs or parts of Windows. So yeah, even if the name sounds kind of random, this is not some folder you want to casually start deleting things from. That would go badly pretty fast. A lot of beginners see a folder full of files and think maybe some of it is junk. In here, definitely not. This is core Windows stuff. Now, the task also talks about environment variables, and this is really the main thing they want you to pick up here. An environment variable is basically just a shortcut name that points to something useful in the system. So instead of always typing out the full path manually, Windows can use a variable to reference it. Think of it like a nickname for a location. Instead of typing the whole address every time, you use the nickname and Windows knows where to go. In this case, the one they care about is the variable for the Windows folder. And that answer is %windir%. If you want to actually test it, you can do it a few different ways. You can open File Explorer and type %windir% into the address bar, and it should take you straight to the Windows directory. That's usually the easiest way to show what it's doing. You can also use it in commands later on, which is where this starts becoming a little more useful. All right, let's check the question. Oh yeah, we were just talking about it a lot, so just paste it there. And go ahead for task number 6. Seems like this one is about user accounts, profiles, and permissions. Basically, not every account on a Windows machine has the same level of access. You've got standard users, you've got administrators, and then you've got built-in accounts and groups sitting underneath that. A standard user is more limited, so they can use the computer normally, but usually can't make bigger system-level changes without permission. An administrator has a lot more control, like installing software, changing system settings, or managing other accounts. So even if 2 accounts both exist on the machine, that does not mean they can both do the same things. It seems like we are administrators in this VM. Let me just check it. Other users, your info. Yeah, we are administrators. Anyway, you could just check it from the start menu too, I forgot. Alrighty, so this part is basically just talking about the fact that since you are the administrator, you can do a bunch of stuffs to other standard users. Like we go back to other users, and you can see this account there, TryHackMe. We could remove or even make him an administrator. Cool stuffs. Now this part here is talking about user profiles, which are usually stored under C:\users. So if you open that up, you'll see the profile directories for the accounts that have logged into the system. That's where things like desktop, documents, downloads, app data, all that stuff lives for each user. A user profile is basically that user's personal space on the computer, where Windows keeps their files, settings, and app data. So if 2 different people use the same PC, each one can still have their own desktop, their own downloads, their own settings, and their own saved app info. Talk about account types and group memberships. In Windows, permissions are often assigned through groups, not just directly to one specific user. Permissions just means what an account is allowed to do or access. So instead of configuring every single account one by one, you stick users into groups, like administrators, users, remote desktop users, and so on. And then those groups carry the permissions. So the group is kind of like a bundle of access rights. If a user is inside that group, they get whatever access that group has. That's why one user can belong to multiple groups at the same time. It's kind of the normal way Windows handles access. So a single account might be a normal user in one sense, but also have some extra allowed actions because it belongs to another group too. So if you want to check this on the VM, the easiest way is usually to open local users and groups. You can do that with this command, which I will not try to pronounce. So right-click on the Start menu, paste it, and from there you can click through users and groups and inspect the accounts directly. This so-called command is just a Windows management tool that opens the local user and group settings. So yeah, this task is really teaching two things at once. First, user data lives in profile directories. Second, access is controlled a lot through account type and group membership. And that matters later, because once you start dealing with privilege escalation or basic Windows enumeration, this is exactly the kind of stuff you look at. Privilege escalation basically means finding a way to go from a lower level of access to a higher one, like from a normal user to admin. Enumeration just means looking around the system and gathering useful information. So, in plain English, later on you'll care a lot about who this user is, what groups they're in, and what that allows them to do. So now we're down at the questions, and this part is really just about checking the user accounts a little. The first one asks for the name of the other user account. So here, you just want to look through the local users and see which account shows up besides the one we've already been dealing with, and that'll give you your answer. So lucky for us, we are already here. So we can see that it is TryHackMe Billy. So let's just type it in. Then the next question asks what groups this user is a member of. This is where you want to open that user up. Check the Member Of tab. And here you go. It is Remote Desktop Users and Users. After that, it asks what built-in account is for guest access to the computer. That one is basically asking you to identify the Windows guest style account. So just look through the built-in accounts and pick out the one meant for that purpose. Yeah, it is pretty straightforward. It is guest. And then the last question asks for the account description. Well, it does not specify to which account, but this description looks kind of sussy, so I guess this one. And yeah, I was right. Much investigator. All right, now we're on task 7, and this one is UAC, which stands for User Account Control. So this is one of those Windows features that basically everyone has seen, even if they never knew what it was called. It's that prompt that shows up when something wants to make bigger changes to the system. And this is important because a lot of people on their own computer are running with pretty high privileges already, which makes sense because it's your device, you install your apps, change your settings, delete files, all that stuff. But that also means if something bad gets onto the machine, like malware or some sketchy program, it would love to use that same level of access. And that's exactly the problem UAC is trying to slow down. Basically, instead of Windows letting every program just do whatever it wants with admin level permissions, it throws in that extra step and asks you to confirm it first. So rather than privileged actions happening quietly in the background, Windows makes it visible. That's why you get the whole, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device pop-up? That is UAC doing its job. Now, is it the most exciting thing in the world? No. Most people just think of it as that annoying box that interrupts them. But from a security point of view, it's actually pretty useful. Because if everything could run with full power automatically, one bad click could turn into a much bigger mess, really fast. So UAC is basically Windows saying, hold on, this action needs elevated privileges. Elevated just means higher level permissions, usually administrator level access. Are you sure you want to continue? Sometimes that just means clicking yes. Other times, especially on a more restricted account, it might ask for an admin password too. You'll also sometimes notice that little shield icon on certain apps or actions in Windows. That's usually a sign that whatever you're about to open or run needs elevated access, so Windows may, hit you with a UAC prompt. Basically, the room there just talks about how it looks in real life. And as you can see in our machine, we have this little download icon on the Wireshark. That's because we are admins. But as you can see there is this little shield intended to prompt us to allow higher level privileges to install the program. So if we would click that one, this window would pop up for password and to let it run anyways. So for this task, the actual question is just asking what UAC stands for. And the answer is, of course, User Account Control. That's task 7 done. The main takeaway here is just that UAC exists to make admin-level actions harder to happen silently, which is a very good thing when you're trying not to let one bad program have full control of the system. All right, now we're on task 8, and this one is Settings and the Control Panel. Let me just open them meanwhile. This is one of those very Windows tasks, because Microsoft has been in this weird half-and-half state for a long time, where some things live in Settings, some things live in Control Panel, and sometimes one of them just throws you into the other one anyway. So basically, both of these are there to let you configure the system. The newer, cleaner-looking one is Settings. The older one that still refuses to die is Control Panel. And honestly, you end up using both because Windows still hasn't fully committed to one path, which is very on brand. Now for the task, you don't really need to go exploring every single option in both menus. That would take forever, and it's not the point. The point is just to recognize that these are two different interfaces for managing system settings, and sometimes the setting you want is easier to find in one than the other. If you open the Start menu and search for Control Panel, you can get there pretty quickly. Once it opens, you'll probably see it in Category View by default. That's usually how Windows presents it first, and it's not always the most convenient if you're trying to answer one of these little room questions. So what you want to do is change the View By option in the top right from Category to Small Icons. Once you do that, everything gets listed out individually, which makes it a lot easier to scan through. And that's what the question is actually about here. They want to know, after changing Control Panel to Small Icons, what is the last setting shown? And the answer for that is Windows Defender Firewall. So yeah, that's the one you put in. This task is mostly just getting you used to the fact that Windows settings are kind of split across two places, which can be annoying, but it's worth knowing because later on, if you can't find something in Settings, there's a pretty decent chance it's still hanging around in Control Panel. Anyway, the answer here is Windows Defender Firewall, and that clears task 8. Let's check out task 9, and this one is Task Manager. This is one of those tools that basically everyone ends up using sooner or later, usually because something stopped responding and now we all get to act like this is totally fine. Basically, Task Manager lets you see what's going on behind the scenes on the system. What's running, how much of the computer it's using, which users are logged in, what services are running, all that kind of stuff. So if the machine feels slow, something is frozen, or some app is chewing through resources for no good reason, this is usually one of the first places you check. And this kind of fits with what you were just seeing in Settings and Control Panel too. Settings is more of the normal, user-friendly area where most people do basic stuff. Control Panel is where Windows starts getting a little more detailed and a little more technical. Task Manager is kind of in that same world where you move from just using the computer to actually checking what it's doing. Now, when you first open Task Manager, Windows sometimes gives you that tiny basic view, which is really just the stripped down version. It'll show open apps and let you close them, which is fine if all you want to do is kill something that froze. But for the actual useful view, click More Details. Once you do that, you get the full layout. You'll see tabs like Processes, Performance, App History, Startup, Users, Details, and Services. You do not need to master every tab right now. Just know this is the main place where Windows lets you inspect what's happening on the machine in a more organized way. The Processes tab is the one most people care about first. That's where you can see what apps and background processes are running and how much CPU, memory, disk, and network they're using. So if one thing is absolutely inhaling your RAM or making your CPU cry, this is where you'll probably spot it. Then the Performance tab gives you more of the big picture. It shows you overall CPU usage, memory usage, disk activity, network usage, stuff like that. So if the computer feels slow and you're trying to figure out whether the system is actually under load or just kind of struggling for some other reason, this tab helps a lot. And just like with settings leading into Control Panel, this is one of those Windows tools where the deeper you go, the more detail you get. Most normal users only need the basics, but once you start troubleshooting or doing more technical work, Task Manager becomes way more useful. Now, the actual question in this task is asking for the keyboard shortcut to open Task Manager directly, and that answer is Control plus Shift plus Escape. And we are done with this task too. The bigger takeaway is just that Task Manager is one of the most useful built-in Windows tools for quickly seeing what the system is doing when something feels off. We're on the last task now, and this one is just the conclusion, so there's nothing to solve here. At this point, you've covered the main Windows basics in the room, so the goal was really just to make sure you're not completely lost when you land on a Windows machine. So yeah, mark Task 10 complete, and that's Windows Fundamentals 1 done. If you want to keep going, the next step is Windows Fundamentals 2. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to check out my other videos, or jump straight to Windows Fundamentals 2. Bye-bye, little orc zombie.